Our service this morning is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube. As usual, we'll start with bell ringing. With the sound of bells, we welcome stranger and friend to a time of mindfulness. Okay, we get several bells. And the next thing on our service is a welcoming song. It will be sung by Howard Crack. I can't hear Howard yet.
I think
wherever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you. Whoever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you.
Thank you, Howard. My opening words this morning are from an essay by Maureen Killoran that she calls "We Come Together Without Creed." In this free church, we come together without creed, focusing instead on the core values of justice, equity, and compassion, of mutual acceptance of our diverse ways of being, as we seek to connect ourselves more fully with the unfolding truths of life and of our world. We come together in shared conviction that all people deserve a voice in matters that concern them, and that it is up to each of us to protect the rights of all, particularly those who, for whatever reason, have long been held in silence. We come together in the stubborn belief that community is possible and that peace is more than a dream. We commit together to affirm in our actions, as well as our words, the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. We come together in awareness of our interdependence with all humanity and with the wider web of existence. For that too is part of what is meant by, quote, we, unquote. In this free church, we come together without creed, believing that the way we live in the world bears testament to the value of our beliefs. For all who have ever walked through our doors, for those who may yet find this spiritual home, for those whose paths will never come our way, and for all those linked to the service today, for all this, we dare to hope and dream.
Morning.
Hey, so you don't mute me. This is the church now. We changed computers. Okay, Steve.
Time?
We light
Okay.
this chalice
You can follow. Okay.
to celebrate the
But
inherent
you're going to light it, right? Yeah.
dignity of every person, to reaffirm the historic pledge of liberal religion, to seek the justice which transcends mere legality and moves toward the resolution of true equality, and to share that love which is ultimately beyond even our cherished reason, that love which unites us.
To unite ourselves together for the study and practice of morality and religion as interpreted by the growing thought and noblest lives of humanity, believing that we may thereby prove helpful one to another and promote the cause of truth, righteousness, and love in the world.
We are Unitarian Universalists, a people of the open minds, loving hearts, and welcoming hands. We care for the earth and each other.
The next element of our service is the offertory. Thank you. And we have and I believe we have
Apologies to our audience for the technical difficulties. Thank you for your patience.
It's my pleasure this morning to introduce our guest speaker. Steve Sullivan is Associate Professor of Philosophy at Edinboro University. He has taught philosophy at EUP since 2004, with specialties in ethics and philosophy of religion. Born and raised in New York City metropolitan area, Steve has been a member of our congregation for 10 years and currently is on its board of trustees. He calls himself a Tolkien geek and an aspiring amateur stand-up comic. You may have read some of Steve's thoughtful letters to the editor. They are often published by the Erie Times News. Today, Steve will be speaking from the pulpit in our sanctuary. You'll hear more about future blended services later. Steve, it's your time.
Ready to go? Thank you, Al. And thank you all for your patience with our technical difficulties. I find it to be a privilege once again to be invited to do a guest sermon. I've done 4 or 5 before, but I'm especially happy to do another one today. My first time setting foot in the sanctuary, our beautiful sanctuary, in well over a year. It's good to be back. I don't know how much longer that will last for, but we're doing the best that we can to cope with this reviving pandemic. So the title of this sermon is called Reflections on Two Common Religious Sayings. It's not meant to be anything systematic or deeply thought out, but I thought I'd share some thoughts and feelings about these sayings, which I think are well known and widely accepted, especially by believers in God, but also I think widely doubted too. The first one is, there but for the grace of God go I. The second one is, everything happens for a reason. And both of these have long intrigued me. The first one, of course, is explicitly religious. And the second one is arguably implicitly religious. And I think the two sayings are interconnected in ways that I hope I will indicate as I go on. As I say, I have mixed feelings about these sayings, as I will explain. These are feelings that reflect my own quote unquote friendly atheism. That's actually the topic, friendly atheism, which I gave my first guest sermon for this congregation way back in 2010. And my feelings also reflect what I sometimes call my irreligious experience of the world, my experience of the world as full of randomness and devoid of overall purpose. You may wonder whether there's an overall purpose for the technical difficulties. No. Sorry, that's a bit too dogmatic. I'm curious, too, how fellow UUs feel about the two sayings, and others as well, not just members of this congregation or fellow Unitarian Universalists. So let me start with the first of the two sayings, there but for the grace of God go I. Again, there's an explicit appeal here to a supernatural or divine agency in the world, the reference to God. And this saying seems to be uttered typically or especially in contexts of the following sorts. Natural disasters happen that are destructive, destructive tornadoes, pandemics, hurricanes, earthquakes, and so on. And they do serious harm in some cases, not in all cases, to human beings, and for that matter, animals and plants. Also, serious harm may be done to human beings and others by human beings in war, a terrorist attack, domestic violence, child abuse, drunk driving, and so on. Third context in which this saying is sometimes uttered, there are far more contexts than I can give you, of course. Some babies are born tragically with serious harm to them already having occurred in the form of major physical or psychological deficits. And the fourth example I want to give is somewhat different. So many people say grace at meals. I certainly grew up saying grace at meals, thanking God for the bounty before us at the dinner table, with a nod, typically unspoken or spoken, to other people who lack hearty food, and perhaps other blessings as well. There, but for the grace of God go I, we may think and say, at least many of us, in these sorts of settings. I should add a qualification. When bad things happen to Nazis, we tend not to say, there, but for the grace of God go I. So there's an important qualification here. We're not thinking of heinous people guilty of heinous crimes. We're thinking of people who are relatively innocent. Babies, of course, are the paradigm case, not of evil people who might well be thought to deserve the bad things that happen to them. There's an obvious and longstanding problem here about the utterance of this saying, there but for the grace of go I, in these sorts of settings. This is the famous problem of evil for those who believe in God, especially a perfect God, all-knowing, all-powerful, and perfectly good. Would God really will or deliberately permit such misfortunes to happen to relatively innocent people while protecting others from them? I remember talking with Christian friends about saying grace at the dinner table, thanking God for the bounty of food and the comfortable home in which the grace sayers are residing. And the question I've put to them is, well, so people who don't have a bountiful food and comfortable home kind of can't thank God for having them since they don't have them. What do we say to them? God planned it that way, that some people get the bounties and some people don't. What is the prayer? What does the grace actually imply? I never got a good answer, I have to say, to that question. I'm still waiting. And of course, there's so many other examples involving serious harms and earthquakes and hurricanes and the Holocaust and the murder of innocent Black men by brutal police and so on. I still find something commendable in this saying, however, there, but for the grace of God go I. If we don't take it literally, you can decide for yourselves how literally you want to take it. But when I think of this saying, I think of a metaphorical interpretation, according to which things happen, bad things happen in the world that are a matter of chance, bad luck, and they're undeserved. I've talked about this in a paper of mine called Some Animals Are More Equal Than Others, topic for a different discussion. And it seems to me that when people say they're but for the grace of God go I and are thinking about God, they're also thinking about a kind of undeservedness, on the surface at least, of misfortune in so many cases. That there's an element of chance or luck or randomness, at least by appearance. I think that's present in a lot of religion that involves belief in God or gods. The second saying, everything happens for a reason, is one that a lot of us can find reason to accept if we ignore any implicit reference to supernatural agency, divine agency. If it just means, for example, every event has a cause, or everything that happens because there's a sufficient reason for its happening, like a causal explanation being true, or motives being in effect for a free choice to be made. It seems pretty commonsensical. Even if or especially if we put aside complications involving quantum physics, which I'll get back to very briefly in a few minutes. But when people say everything happens for a reason, it seems pretty clear, I think, that they're not just saying every event has a cause. That there's a sufficient explanation for everything that happens. They're referring implicitly to a grand plan or design behind the event. And they say everything happens for a reason, to comfort others, typically, who've endured the serious harms mentioned earlier, or other serious harms. Well, how is the comforting supposed to work? The idea seems to be to reassure the recipient of the comforting that these harms are not mere chance events, but serve some good and higher purpose, knowable or not. And there's an implication here of supernatural or divine agency. There's a higher purposer or intelligent designer, presumably a deity, who can turn apparent evils, serious harms, into good. Well, this brings us back right away to the problem of evil. And I don't want to pursue it further. It's a topic in itself, a topic for a talk in itself, one I've given before in a different context and in many classes of mine. at Edinboro University. I just want to note that this saying is most readily understood in terms of a reference, at least implicit, to God or gods, the intelligent designer or purposer who brings good out of evil. I'd like to focus instead, and most of the time that's left to me, on two things. Well, an intriguing complication is the first one. Many non-believers in God seem to accept that everything happens for a reason, in the sense of a purpose, a higher purpose. Even children raised in religionless homes show a tendency to think this way, according to psychologists at Yale University, Banerjee and Bloom. Full names, by the way, would be Kanika Banerjee and Paul Bloom. Bloom in particular is a very eminent psychologist. So why would people who don't believe in God say everything happens for a purposeful reason? There's different answers, and this could be New Age thinking of a kind. There could be an element of Carl Jung's idea of synchronicity. Side note, my father was a big fan of Carl Jung, as well as a devout Catholic. There may be some Hindu or Buddhist notion of karma. Could be that even non-believers in God retain an element of theistic feeling. They haven't fully moved beyond belief in God. I think that's probably true for Jung, who seldom talks about God as a supreme being, but whose talk of synchronicity may be best understood in just that way. And most interestingly, there's some evidence, scientific evidence, psychologists tell us, that human beings have a natural tendency to find purposeful patterns, even in random events. We're hardwired, the story goes, to think that way. This tendency, by the way, is called apophenia, or sometimes patternicity. Natural tendency that we may all have. Some of us resist it better than others. Scientists, for example. The final point I want to make about everything happens for a reason is that there are practical and moral worries, I think reasonable ones, about trying to comfort others by telling them that everything happens for a reason. And a number of therapists and other counseling psychologists have made this point, sometimes quite vehemently. For example, Elena Primack-Sandler, who seems to be a therapist, I can't quite make sense of all the abbreviations for titles that she has written that if you want to cheer up friends and loved ones who are going through difficult times, you may find yourself saying, I know how you feel. You know, everything happens for a reason. Cheer up, think positive. It's totally for the best. You just don't know it now. Time heals. This could turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to you. God has a plan. And Sandler's comment is, you've probably made your friend feel even worse. She's talked with friends of hers who've been through difficult times, and they rank everything happens for a reason as one of the least supportive things that friends can say and do. Okay. Another thinker, I don't know his background, Tim Lawrence, is quite a bit more sharp-tongued about trying to comfort others by saying everything happens for a reason. This had to happen for you to grow. He says, and I quote, that's the kind of bullshit that destroys lives, and it's categorically untrue. And then he puts it this way. If you faced a tragedy and someone tells you in any way, shape, or form that your tragedy was meant to be, that it happened for a reason, that it will make you a better person, or that taking responsibility for it will fix it, you have every right to remove them from your life. And he adds, some things in life cannot be fixed. They can only be carried. It's quite emphatic that human beings should not dare to try to comfort one another with what he regards as this highly insensitive comment. Though well-intended, everything happens for a reason. Let me wrap things up. What I find acceptable in this first saying, there, but for the grace of God go I mean, is the metaphorical understanding of it as an acknowledgement of randomness, chaos, chance, luck in life, which I think is ineliminable, whether you believe in God or not. What I find almost acceptable in the second saying, everything happens for a reason, is the principle of universal causation. That is, every event has a cause. But quantum physics, as generally understood to the present day, I'm no physicist, tells us that there are random events that happen without cause, without determining cause at the microphysical level. So maybe there are exceptions to the principle of universal causation. Whether they apply at the macro level in which we live is another matter. You won't find me endorsing publicly either of these two sayings because I think that they're misleading at best. But what about you? What do you think? Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Steve. And as we move on in our service, we come to the chat box and adding your, if you wish, your joys or concerns in our chat box. There'll be some meditation music, which is recorded. There's a message, Clyde, I think you'll find it on the, oh no, excuse me, you have it up right now. And the name of the meditation music. So let's proceed with that. I have in my script for the service today that the next element is acknowledging the joys and concerns that have been put into the chat box. What I don't have is who's doing that. Kelly, do you know?
I'd be happy to jump in and do that. Lots and lots of love and gratitude, mostly for Steve and his very thoughtful presentation. Many people remarked on that, and lots of support from people, and gratitude for working through the technical difficulties, and recognizing that we are in a process of learning as we move towards blended services.
Thank you for doing that. I think we can proceed now to the closing words and extinguishing the chalice. And I'll lead those. The closing words are from Deb Cannon, called Wiser Today. I've made mistakes, and some I have even learned from. I am wiser today than I was yesterday, and hopefully tomorrow. And hopefully tomorrow I'll be even better informed. May I speak from my learning and not from my habit. If I speak from my habit, may I interrupt my words to start again. If I don't know, may I be silent and listen. We need now to, before we get to announcements, we need to extinguish the chalice. We'll use these words to extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of love, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.